Welcome back, dear ones. Last week we watched as Moses stood barefoot before the burning bush and received his divine calling. Today, that calling is put to the test, as he returns to Egypt with a message from God, "Let my people go." Let's walk with him now, into the heart of courage, obedience, and deliverance.
Imagine for a moment that you are trapped in a job that drains your soul, bound by circumstances that seem impossible to escape. You feel the weight of invisible chains holding you back from the life you know you are meant to live. Your dreams feel distant, your purpose buried under layers of obligation and fear. If this resonates with your heart today, then the story we are about to explore together was written specifically for you. This is the story of Moses and the greatest liberation in human history, found in the book of Exodus, chapters 4 through 14. A story that speaks directly to every person who has ever felt enslaved by their circumstances, paralyzed by fear, or trapped in cycles they cannot break. Today, we discover how God specializes in setting captives free, how divine power works through the most unlikely vessels, and how your greatest breakthrough often comes disguised as your greatest challenge. Welcome to a journey of freedom, courage, and the unshakable truth that no chain is too strong for the God who created you. Our story begins with a man who understood fear intimately. Moses, standing before a burning bush that would not be consumed, hearing the voice of the Almighty God calling him to the impossible task of confronting the most powerful ruler on earth. Exodus chapter 3 reveals that God had heard the cries of his people, the Israelites, who had been enslaved in Egypt for over 400 years. Their suffering had reached heaven, and the time for deliverance had come. But when God chose Moses as his deliverer, Moses responded with every excuse we have ever used when facing our calling. He questioned his ability, his worthiness, his speaking skills. Sound familiar? How often do we disqualify ourselves from the very thing God is calling us to do? Moses represents every one of us who has felt inadequate for the task before us, who has looked at our limitations instead of God's limitless power. The cultural context here is crucial to understanding the magnitude of what God was asking. Pharaoh was not just a king, he was considered a god by the Egyptian people. His power was absolute, his word was law, and he owned every Hebrew slave. To challenge Pharaoh was to challenge a system that had been in place for generations. This was not just political rebellion. This was spiritual warfare on the highest level. Moses returned to Egypt with nothing but a staff in his hand and the promise of God's presence. When he first approached Pharaoh with God's demand to let his people go, Pharaoh's response revealed the hardened pride that keeps all of us in bondage. He not only refused, but made the Israelites' burden heavier, forcing them to make bricks without straw. This is the pattern of oppression. When we begin to seek freedom, the enemy of our souls often increases the pressure, hoping to break our resolve. The Israelites turned on Moses, blaming him for their increased suffering. Moses cried out to God in frustration, asking why he had sent him if things were only getting worse. This is the struggle of every person who has ever stepped out in faith, only to face greater resistance. Moses was learning what we all must learn, that breakthrough often requires us to push through breakdown. Then came the plagues, 10 supernatural demonstrations of God's power over every aspect of Egyptian life and religion. Each plague was a direct challenge to Egyptian gods, showing that the God of Israel was supreme over all creation. Water turned to blood, frogs covered the land, gnats swarmed, flies invaded, livestock died, boils broke out. Hail destroyed crops, locusts devoured what remained. Darkness covered the land for 3 days. With each plague, Pharaoh would promise to let the people go, then harden his heart when the plague was removed. This cycle of promise and betrayal, hope and disappointment, mirrors the toxic patterns many of us know too well in our own lives and relationships. The Israelites watched in amazement as their God fought for them, yet fear and doubt still gripped their hearts. They had been slaves for so long that freedom felt foreign, even frightening. This is the psychology of captivity, when we have been bound for so long that we begin to identify with our chains. We see this in people trapped in abusive relationships, dead-end careers, addictive behaviors, or limiting beliefs about themselves. The familiar, even if painful, feels safer than the unknown promise of something better. The final plague was the most devastating and the most terrifying. God announced that every firstborn in Egypt would be taken, but He provided a way of escape for those who would trust and obey. Each Hebrew family was to sacrifice a lamb and put its blood on the doorposts of their home. When the angel of death passed through Egypt that night, he would pass over every home marked by the blood. This became known as the Passover, a picture of substitutionary sacrifice that would echo through history. Pharaoh finally released the Israelites after losing his own firstborn son. But his hardened heart could not let them go permanently. If this story moves your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear about God's delivering power today. The moment of ultimate crisis came at the Red Sea. With the Egyptian army pursuing them from behind and an impossible body of water before them, the Israelites faced their greatest test of faith. They could see no way forward and no way back. They cried out in terror, blaming Moses for bringing them to die in the wilderness. They said it would have been better to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. This is the moment when our faith is tested most severely, when circumstances seem impossible and our past looks more appealing than our future. Exodus 14 verses 13-14 tell us that Moses stood before the people and spoke words that ring through the ages. Do not fear, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent. Moses stretched out his staff over the sea, and God sent a strong east wind that divided the waters. The Israelites walked through on dry ground with walls of water on both sides. When the Egyptians tried to follow, the waters returned, and the entire army was inundated by the crushing power of the Red Sea. Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians, and they feared the Lord and believed in the Lord and in His servant Moses. This was not just physical deliverance, but spiritual transformation. The same people who had been complaining and doubting now burst into songs of praise and worship. Freedom had finally become real to them, not just as a concept, but as a lived experience. Their identity shifted from slaves to the chosen people of God. The journey that began with fear and excuses ended with faith and celebration. Moses, who had started as a reluctant leader filled with self-doubt, became the confident servant of the Most High God. The people who had been enslaved for generations stepped into their destiny as a nation called to represent God's character to the world. For those exploring faith for the first time, this story reveals the heart of a God who hears our cries and specializes in impossible rescues. You may feel trapped by circumstances beyond your control, bound by past mistakes, or paralyzed by fear of the unknown. The same God who heard the Israelites groaning hears your heart today. He sees every tear, knows every struggle, and has a plan for your freedom that is greater than anything you can imagine. Your deliverance may not come with dramatic plagues and parted seas, but it will come with the same divine power and perfect timing. For those whose spiritual journey feels derailed or distant, remember that Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before God called him to his greatest work. Your setbacks are not disqualifications, but preparations for something greater. According to the book of Numbers, chapter 14, verses 33 to 34, the Israelites wandered for 40 more years before entering their promised land. But every step was part of God's plan to transform them from slaves into the people He created them to be. God is still in the business of setting captives free, still calling ordinary people to extraordinary purposes, still making ways where there seems to be no way. Perhaps you are standing at your own Red Sea moment, facing circumstances that seem impossible to overcome. Perhaps you are hearing God's call but responding with Moses' excuses. Perhaps you are in the middle of your own plagues, watching God work but still struggling to fully trust. Whatever your situation, know that the same God who delivered Israel is present with you right now. He is not intimidated by any Pharaoh in your life, any system that has held you captive, or any enemy that seems too powerful to defeat. From the New Testament, in the book of Corinthians, chapter 7, verse 23, we read, "You were bought with a price. Do not become bondservants of men. Your freedom has already been purchased. Your victory has already been won, and your breakthrough is closer than you think." The God of Moses is calling you by name, inviting you into a life of purpose and freedom that exceeds your wildest dreams. The same power that split the Red Sea lives within you. The same love that heard the cries of slaves hears your heart today. And the same faithfulness that led Israel through the wilderness will lead you home. As we close, receive this blessing. May you walk in the freedom Christ has won for you. May you step boldly into the calling God has placed on your life. And may you always remember that no chain is too strong, no enemy too powerful, and no situation too impossible for the God who specializes in setting captives free. If this message has stirred your spirit or spoken to your heart, please like this video, share it with someone in need of encouragement, and subscribe for more stories of hope, healing, and transformation. Join us next week as the journey continues when Moses ascends Mount Sinai, and the people receive a divine covenant, the 10 Commandments. Your breakthrough is closer than you think, my friend. Hold fast, stand still, and watch the salvation of the Lord unfold before you.
Thank you for spending these moments with me today. I hope this story stirred something meaningful in your spirit. A reminder that even in times of worry, fear, or doubt, you are never alone. If this video brought you comfort or inspiration, I invite you to subscribe and stay connected. And if someone you love could use a little hope or joy today, feel free to share it with them. Until next time, may your path be guided by peace, love, light, and unity.